Push the table back. All right, we are going to transition back to our typical KBMP world of having presenters. This next one is going to be a remote presentation. And it is from someone that you all have become very familiar with over the years. This is Clint Alexander with ESSA, who is going to be giving us an update on the IFRMP. So Clint, are you ready to join us and share your screen? All right.
Here is a sound check. Randy, do you hear me?
Sound check, 1, 2. I hear you and I see your slides. So
great.
Thank you very much, Clint.
Yeah, thank you, Randy. A really interesting discussion. Hopefully didn't get cut too short. So those of you that do know about the IFRMP, this presentation is really just an update following the workshop we just had in Ashland at the end of September. Many of you, several of you attended it, and for those that weren't able to be there, the benefit of this presentation is just sort of a catching up with moment on where this project is at, and hopefully we'll just create some interest in staying tuned for the final plan that's coming out in January. I have quite a few slides, so I'm going to be going pretty fast, I think. And Randy, I'm assuming I'm going to still get my time.
Correct. Yeah, Clint, you take your time.
Clock is on. You know, Mike Belchek said just in his opening remarks that dam removal was not a cure-all. I mean, it's obviously the single biggest thing that you probably can do to restore dynamic habitats and processes and fish population benefits. So it certainly is a hugely momentous thing. The IFRMP, I think, is one of the integrative plans that kind of brings together what should be done in and around, you know, following dam removal in terms of things that aren't necessarily just stuck on the main stem and where the focus of all of these important efforts are with dam removal. There is a tie-in. Central question for the IFRMP that you can read this slide. I won't belabor this, but the IFRMP, the Integrated Fisheries Restoration Monitoring Plan that was started in 2016, led by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission, is really taking a basin-wide look at what habitat restoration actions will provide the broadest benefits for all of the species that you're seeing on the slide, and how do folks iteratively adjust the priorities for that restoration and monitoring through time. That's the real essence of what the plan is trying to tackle. It takes a process-based, you know, functional watershed restoration viewpoint, where in the frameworks that underpin this plan, many things are linked to this functional pyramid. Watershed inputs right through to the fluvial geomorphic processes that obviously are really key in the immediate aftermath of dam removal, up through to the habitats for the 10 focal fish species, through to biological interactions, and ultimately the fish populations that should benefit from all of those linked processes that will be being restored through not only dam removal, but habitat restoration actions of many various kinds. The IFRMP isn't here to one-up or compete with other plans. It's an integrative plan. We've worked really hard collaborating with many other teams that have created many excellent regional plans to make sure that they're called out in this document and that some of the recommendations from them are making it into our lists of projects and other features of the plan. We have created conceptual models in earlier stages, developed objectives and performance indicators that once again are, you probably can't read this table on the right here, but thinking about that process hierarchy that I just showed you a couple slides back, everything is mapped to that framework. including down to some specific CPIs. And that's always a hard thing to do because there's many things you can measure, many things are important. Our team, those of you that are familiar with Natasha and our team, she brought forward this sort of vital signs metaphor with thinking about going to your doctor's office, and of course, there's all sorts of tests you can get. A lot of them are important, but usually you start with a smaller subset of really key things that you look at before digging deeper, and that's sort of something we've done in the IFRMP. One of the most important features of the plan is a multi-criteria prioritization approach. We've run this at around 154, 155 projects that were identified for all of the basins, and we've updated it now probably 3-4 times based on different rounds of stakeholder reviews. This looks at a whole bunch of things. Where are these 10? When you're proposing a project, how much overlap does the project have with the 10 focal fish species? What's the habitat restoration need as indexed by CPIs and CPI proxies if we didn't have them, which we often didn't at the landscape basin-wide scale? How many stressors does a particular kind of restoration address? Again, with linkages to that biophysical hierarchy, functional hierarchy. What is the perceived scale of benefit, which is a largely qualitative component? Do we think that a restoration action has really local benefits, or it provides broader scale benefits to the 10 focal fish species? And then recently we've just completed those that were at the workshop or with us last spring and at the workshop in September, looking at the practical issue of implementability, red tape, permitting, land ownership. All of those things were also brought in recently, and definitely each time we've brought in an update to these criteria, the lists by sub-basin start to shuffle a little bit. Anyway, the IFRMP, the intent with this is that it can be and will be rerun through time as people continue to learn. So there is a tool you can screenshot or write down, klamath.essa.com, and also you can go to the Klamath website and find out this information. That's actually the better way to do this, ifrmp.net, and it'll mention to you these guest or credentials to be able to run the tool. Those that haven't seen it in a while, it looks like this. And you pick a sub-basin that you're interested in, and then there's now a series of scenarios that are here. And once you select a scenario, these different criteria have some weights. I don't have time to get into all of these details, but the most important thing is at the bottom is a set of projects that have been ranked, the highest scoring projects currently at the top and the lowest at the bottom. And in the latest round of the IFRMP, we spent quite a bit of time working on costing for these projects and some of the related monitoring that goes with them. And you can use this tool like a kind of a real estate app and put your budget limits in, and you can constrain the list and have the list change based on some budgetary filters if you like. And proceed to do that for any sub-basin that you care about. And then there's different features around maps and other supporting information that you can find out about in it. So check that out if you care too, but this is the engine that's driving the lists of prioritized projects in the plan. It's been quite a journey. I don't think the original intention was for this to last this long, but as Matt Bond could do a better job explaining, there have been some political moments where it was necessary to press the pause button, and we took some breaks, and we had a pandemic and other things that didn't add speed to our work. But we're now at a place where we're finalizing the plan. We're looking at things to do with implementation, specifically solicitation process advice, report card templates, and we did get a lot of great advice at the workshop in Ashland about other components of implementation that the service and others should think about. Matt in September at the workshop had a few remarks. What I'm showing you on this fairly wordy slide is what we really focused on in Ashland at the end of September. Matt's main message was that, you know, if not now, when? In terms of the funding that's available, not only from U.S. Fish and Wildlife, but the other partner agencies with money, and hopefully using plans like this one and others to be a little clearer and strategic about what investments to make. So it is pretty cool, dam removal is happening, that there's money available, and that we have some excellent plans that are ready to inform actions. As a Canadian, I didn't wake up and have the guts to look at what happened in your election, I think it was yesterday, but hopefully the implications of that aren't too swift for work like this. We've spent, at the very beginning of this plan, we spent a lot of time trying to assuage just fears that we were kind of creating a black box where there'd be a list and that was it, and it wasn't going to be a sort of a living plan. And we've worked really hard to try to communicate that the IFRMP document, whenever you pick it up in time, it's a snapshot. There's pieces of it, like the tool, that are dynamic and meant to be updated, not just set and forgotten about. And I think at the workshop, I really believe we got this across to the audience. This fact that the plan offers a really well-articulated, thought-through, peer-reviewed starting point to get serious about decisions about what to do with funding actual projects. And there's all sorts of factors that will change whether one thing that's at the top of the list actually happens first, or like third or fourth, or not immediately. We had some great conversations like that in Ashland. The workshop was very well attended, nearly 100 people, really strong representation across organizations and entities. And we had three main questions that we looked at the workshop. One of them was, which project concepts do you feel are most suitable for near-term implementation? One of the things about the IFRMP that I think helps is that the projects in it are largely project concepts, not fully fleshed out, implementable projects that are ready to be contracted to do. That would be impossible at the scale of the entire basin. And largely what we want to do is identify the project concepts, the classes and types of projects that people think are the most valuable, and create either 1 or 2 year restoration action agenda for the Klamath. And those restoration action agenda would be updated every year or two and used to inform various funding solicitations, certainly the ones that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service will use, maybe others depending on how things evolve. And we went through a lot of arts and crafts where we had all of these 155 projects on the wall and on mural boards, and we asked participants to do things like upvote and downvote projects. We actually started with a discussion about implementability because this was the first presentation of those results, and we sort of chipped away at it, was what our workshop plan was. It worked exceptionally well. We were really pleased with the engagement and the input we received, which we're currently processing. And we started with implementability. Do you think, here's what the survey results said, this particular kind of project it was suggested that it was relatively easy or hard. Do you agree? And explain why if you don't. And we're currently using the workshop input to further refine the implementability scores. I'm sure, I mean, this is a weird word, implementability. What I mean by that is what's shown here on this slide in this definition. The top here, you might have noticed, red tape, technical, logistical, just general agreeability. There's 3 sort of pieces to it that we surveyed, and we create a final measure of this and build it into that prioritization system. It's only one of those criteria, so it doesn't drive everything. But prior to the spring, it was turned off, and it definitely had an impact on what projects were considered the most doable. And then we continued to move through this idea of the restoration projects themselves, and we did some exercises on up voting, down voting, and we eventually asked people, hey, just tell us if you can only do 3 or 5 projects in the next couple of years, what would they be? And we asked for that input, and we will use that input to further present the restoration action agenda in the final report. So again, we have great math and great code, and we've done a lot of surveys with many of you, and every time we ask you to review these projects or to update things, you shockingly do come forward with some new thoughts. And so pretty fresh, it was September. So we're trying to stamp that into the final document for you for January. And yeah, that's what those of you that were there, that's what it looked like being in the room. Those that were virtual had mural boards for all this stuff. I just mentioned these restoration action agendas. Not everything can be accomplished at once, and the workshop actually was largely a kind of a pilot of one component of what might be a Klamath Week or a future science symposia, planning and science symposia event that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and partners hold. Because this process that we went through will need to be iteratively done at least every couple of years, and Matt Bond was suggesting possibly annually. And at the end of that, this is what we're doing right now. We're basically compiling all of the many sticky dots, votes, and using those to understand revisions to the priorities, and we have a formal system that will document in the plan about how we're taking that input to refine the priority list again. But it wasn't just a it wasn't just a song and dance exercise. All of that input was transcribed and ultimately converted into numbers in various tools that we have for the project. Second question was on the monitoring front, was more about which sets of core performance indicators and related metrics would be most appropriate for tracking and reporting the overall health or state of the Klamath Basin. Earlier in your conversation a moment ago on the panel, there was a comment about gaps in monitoring. What is it? That's largely what my colleagues focused on. And the monitoring part of the plan is just recommendations to close gaps. It's largely a status and trends look at the basin, and it's looking at metrics that are measurable and applicable at a basin-wide scale where appropriate. And we've had great input at that functional level from a lot of you, and we continue to be really, really thankful. Darcy and Aaron just had many great conversations about monitoring questions and gaps with everybody. And by the numbers, it produced a lot of 48 monitoring recommendations for 19 CPIs across those 5 tiers. And they range from things like the unique data collection activities to analyses to a modeling study to actually running different workshops to actually scope out the more complex tasks. And actually our plan recommends that U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service or others pay for those technical workshops on those more complicated topics so that can get resolved. Monitoring recommendations were also costed, some excellent cost calculators that we put together and worked with all of you on to try to define not only the restoration costs, but the monitoring costs. Don't have time to hit you with the details of all of this, but yes, it gets expensive, especially when you start planning longer range. We also wanted to and started a conversation about what people thought that State of the Basin report card should contain with respect to CPIs and some of those monitoring efforts that would help inform them. And the last thing we looked at was the implementation needs going forward. What type of oversight, implementation, support do you think a plan like this needs to keep it alive and to keep it relevant? And we set up a set of building blocks for this that range from regular meetings or science symposia. We talked about standard data portals and atlases, administrative support needs like restoration help desks, right from the point of view of submitting people were asking would I submit a project proposal to access some of these funds, to once I have my project funded, I might still need some help. Some good conversations about that, and how that all gets connected together. And yes, we weren't addressing the overarching governance in terms of directing final decisions or what exactly, drawing org charts of what Reclamation and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service would do and so on. That's not how we approached it. It was more from the process standpoint. Lots of great feedback on other components of implementation that will be in Chapter 6, which is as yet unwritten in the IFRMP. Great input for finishing that piece of the plan. And then, again, we reiterated that the IFRMP is more describing project concepts, not detailed project proposals. And when we provide the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service recommendations on proposal solicitation guidance, that's something they will take on in terms of how to make that the bridge from a project concept to a detailed proposal, while linking back to the IFRMP. And so this graphic sort of looks at how that process flow could go in the future in terms of how to update priorities. Yes, you have a plan, but then people need to get together in workshop settings like the one we ran, or a Klamath Week where there's fun field tours, as well as discussions about just the high-level planning, governance side of things, down to profile projects and learnings that are going on, through to creating the next restoration action agenda, to funding iterative rounds of project proposals, and then tracking everything. So this is a lot of the new stuff coming in Chapter 6 of the IFRMP in January, and as mentioned, has to be kept alive and repeated as people learn and things change and time marches on. Climate change also will march on, and there'll be lots of surprises to deal with. And lastly, this is where we're at. We're hugely impressed with the amount of input we got in September. So we're taking all of that input and looking to finalize the plan, update the projects and so on, with creating these restoration action agenda and updating the implementability piece, creating a report card template for that. It's a huge document. People like more easy to consume science communication products, and we're looking at a State of the Basin report card for that. And hopefully, and I understand Matt will be hosting another implementation workshop for the next round of U.S. Fish and Wildlife funding in the spring of 2023. IFRMP will definitely inform the themes that are going to be probably awarded more points than less points in that funding round. And we've updated the Klamath website just to make it a little more relevant to where we are now, so it's a little easier to find things and more friendly to the public. And you can take a look at that website if you want to find out about the plan or the tool or other components of the work as we release final products. That is it. I raced. I hope you were able to understand some of what I said. happy to take questions. Go back and slow down.
All right, Clint, thank you. You are the master of sometimes putting up some tables that nobody can read because they have such crazy small print, but I'll forgive you for that this time. Thank you for that. I don't believe there are questions in the chat. I'm going to double check here. Are there any questions in the room at all for Clint?
Yeah, I put some links in the and citations in there that go back to now.
Thank you, Chauncey. One thing, if I can, Clint, can you go back to the contact slide, please? Perfect. All right. If I am stupid enough to step on the third rail, I'm going to do it just for a brief question. Clint, there were some discussions and kind of surprising comments at one of the breakout sessions at the last IFRMP workshop that talked about when we were going back to reprioritize the restoration projects. And there were quite a few that were ranked up pretty high. And I'm not going to mention names or specific projects or actions, but basically restoration projects that were to address problems that had to deal with regulatory agencies not enforcing the existing rules. That we would be prioritizing our money, spending it on things that like this is already illegal. Why isn't it being addressed? And I know it's a challenging question for you, but you know, it gets back to when there are bad actors and we have these priorities to help fund their work to repair the damage they already did. Like it, you know, it's a bigger picture question, and one that, you know, I think we're facing in different, you know, depending on the organization you work for or, you know, where you live, those things come up in different ways. And so I'm wondering if there's anything to comment on about kind of what, now that we've had that at least brief discussion at the IFRMP meeting, kind of, is there any actions or follow-up on that, on how to address that?
Well, as a contractor, that is a tough question for me. I mean, I think there's a whole bunch of themes that we're able to collect from the input we received, and that includes things like enforcement and versus an actual shovel-ready project that is obviously very different. I think that will be addressed in terms of distinguishing the core themes. I mean, the restoration action agenda is not just like it's not just another list of, you know, a more refined list of projects. It also includes what are the big themes that people are talking about, and that ought to challenge the agencies that are funding projects to, you know, whether they need to take some things to the back room, Randy, and look at how they're taking care of their governance around what they're supposed to be doing. That hopefully will happen, versus an innovative new restoration project. You know, those things are very different, and those themes will be drawn out in the plan. Yeah. It really is up to the agencies with responsibilities to respond to that question. So if Matt were here, I would have deferred to him.
Yeah, and I didn't want to kind of lead you right onto the third rail yourself.
That's fun.
But part of that, part of that conversation was, well, what next? Because as we, knowing that the restoration dollars are very limited, should some of these things that should already be addressed through a regulatory standpoint, why were those, originally at the top of the list, kind of a thing? And
what I would say, the only other thing I should have said at the beginning that's a little simpler is stay tuned for the final list, because I think some of them will change.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that's good to hear. I agree. It's a different conversation to kind of bring those, the specifics of that perhaps to light, to see what can be addressed, because there's only so much work that we can do here collectively, and it's a there's big challenges in the basin. So, all right. Any other questions for Clint at all in the room? Come on up, Josh. It's my co-host today.
Hey, Clint, I enjoyed your talk. I just had a quick question for you. I'm sorry if this was addressed in the Ashland meeting. I didn't make it. I was just curious, with all of the talk of implementation projects and money coming in, was it discussed at that meeting for hiring people in the communities that live in the river, so that some of that money goes back to those communities that rely on the river?
Sorry, it's Josh?
Yes.
Yeah, no, thank you, Josh. That wasn't, certainly in the groups that I was facilitating, that wasn't explicitly discussed. The closest thing to that was discussed was administrative support needing to be part of implementation, things like help desks and other infrastructure to move that amount of money around efficiently to things that matter. So I think it was implied, but it didn't get down to the level of linking to specific communities. But I definitely understand what you're saying, and that kind of suggestion I think is a good one to share with people like Matt Bond and Chris Wheaton, who are the overseers of the IFRMP. So I encourage you to share that idea with the agency leads who are getting baskets of money.
I appreciate you considering the suggestion. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. I can't see the people online. I don't know if anyone has their hand raised. Go ahead and you can ask a question. I'm going to try to pull that up real quick. I don't see anybody. Well, we are, slightly past the time we were hoping to end. It's just a brief moment past, but I want to thank everyone for joining us, both virtually, you and everyone in person. We have plans for tomorrow, same time, same place. The Zoom link is the same. The room is the same. We'll have our more typical variety of talks that we are used to at KBMP. We got some great dam removal conversations and monitoring discussions today. And I'm looking forward to, to learning more about some of the work we're going to be talking about tomorrow, about the tributaries and more about water quality. There's some fisheries talks tomorrow. So it's going to be a good set of conversations tomorrow as well. So I just want to thank everyone for that, for being here, for being good listeners. Chauncey wants to get the last question in.
This is for, maybe you can repeat this. On the panel, at least Dave and I couldn't see the questions. If there were unanswered questions, people can reach out to us.
Yes. Yeah. If there's any unanswered questions that happened in the chat or something that comes up, feel free to email me, or you can put it in the chat tomorrow and just reference in regards to yesterday's dam removal discussion, reference it appropriately, and we'll try to get those answered. And within the KBMP meeting website, we'll integrate the chat questions and responses under each topic. So we'll try to get that. All right. Hand up. Oh, hand up, hand down. All right. Go ahead.
It's an upsetting hand.
Yes. Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone for your patience today and for being good listeners. And we will see you all tomorrow. All right. Thanks again.